What if everything you know isn't knowledge at all? What if what we call truth is just the most convincing illusion? This is not just a question. It is the question. What is knowledge? Where does it come from? How do we trust it? From ancient riddles to modern science, from reason to revelation, this is a journey through how we come to know. And what happens when we find we might not know anything at all? In Athens, 24 centuries ago, Socrates asked one of his students, "What is knowledge?" The student replied, "Knowing what is true." Socrates smiled. "But how do you know what is true?" That single question echoed across history, reshaping how we define not only knowledge but truth itself. Plato tried to answer it. He called knowledge justified true belief. Not opinion, not faith, but belief with good reasons, and one that matches reality. But over 2,000 years later, a quiet academic named Edmund Gettier shattered that model with a few short pages. He told strange little stories. A man looks at a clock that happens to be broken, but by chance, it shows the right time. He believes it's noon. It is noon. He has justification. But do we say he knows the time, or was he just lucky? Suddenly, knowledge wasn't so easy to pin down, and philosophers were back at square one. To understand knowledge more clearly, we need to ask not just what it is, but what kinds of knowledge exist. Because not all knowing looks the same. The most familiar kind is propositional knowledge, knowing that something is the case. The Earth orbits the Sun. 2 + 2 is 4. Paris is the capital of France. But even here, certainty starts to slip. Bertrand Russell showed that even in mathematics, truth depends on which axioms we choose. Euclidean geometry says parallel lines never meet, but in other geometries they do. Same logic, different rules. So what we think we know depends on the frame we're looking through. But not all knowing is about abstract facts. Sometimes we know things not by thinking, but by doing. Riding a bicycle? Tying your shoelaces? Dancing without counting steps? This is practical knowledge, knowing how to do something, often without being able to explain it. Gilbert Ryle called this knowing how, and argued it was fundamentally different from knowing that. You could memorize 1,000 pages on violin technique and still play terribly. But others, like Jason Stanley, disagree. They argue that even skills depend on hidden knowledge, unconscious facts working behind the scenes. So the debate remains. Are we acting from instinct? Or from invisible propositions we just can't name? And then there's a kind of knowing that escapes words entirely. Not a skill, not a fact, but a feeling. You don't learn grief from a textbook. You don't know your mother's face by reading a list of traits. William James called it knowledge by acquaintance. It's a kind that comes from being with something, not describing it. Bertrand Russell saw this as foundational, the raw material for reason to build upon, but others questioned its value. If I say, I know love, how can I prove it? How do we compare one person's experience with another's? So again, is it knowledge or poetry? If these are the types of knowledge, then what are the paths we use to get there? Philosophers and scientists have long debated the tools we use to know the world, and whether any of them can be trusted. Reason is the architect of logic. Descartes built his entire philosophy on it. I think, therefore I am. If we doubt everything else, reason still stands. But not everyone agreed. Nietzsche mocked reason as a cage, a tool humans made, then forgot they made it. Even logic, he said, is rooted in human emotion. So reason may be precise, but is it pure? Others place their faith not in thought, but in the senses. If you can see it, hear it, touch it, it must be real. John Locke believed the mind was a blank slate, and that all knowledge came through the senses. Nothing is in the intellect, he wrote, that wasn't first in the senses. But Hume took it further and ran into trouble. He realized we never actually see causation. We just assume it. A ball hits another, and we expect movement. But that expectation is a habit, not a fact. The senses give us impressions, but do they give us truth? And even if our senses work, how do we share what we know? Language gives shape to thought, but also walls it in. Wittgenstein wrote, "The limits of my language mean the limits of my world. Try describing the color red to someone blind from birth, or defining freedom in one sentence. Orwell warned us, when language is twisted, truth becomes dangerous. So, is language our greatest gift or our greatest trap? But what about the knowledge that comes from within, from our past, from what we carry? Memory feels solid, familiar, but science shows it's soft, malleable, rewritten every time we recall. We don't remember the past, we reconstruct it. Yet memory is the root of identity. Strip away your memories, and who are you? Can something so fragile be the foundation of knowledge? Beyond memory, there's another voice. Quieter, flicker, a gut feeling. Some call it instinct. Others call it a glimpse of truth. Spinoza believed in intuitive knowledge, a flash that shows the whole, not the parts. Mystics say it's how we touch the divine. But skeptics argue it's just pattern recognition, bias dressed as insight. So is intuition wisdom, or wishful thinking? And what about all the things we've never experienced, never reasoned out, never felt, but still believe? You know the earth is round, but have you measured it? You believe in atoms, but have you seen one? Most of our knowledge comes from others. Books, teachers, voices online, but who decides what counts as a credible voice? And when testimony contradicts our experience, who wins? Even beyond words, there are things we feel in our bones, things that don't ask permission to be known. We're taught to mistrust emotion, as if it clouds reason. But Martha Nussbaum argues, emotion is how we reason. It tells us what matters, what's sacred, what's at stake. Emotions are not noise or signals. But can we build knowledge on feelings, or are they too wild to trust? And finally, the most ancient and most divisive path to knowing, faith. For Kierkegaard, faith was a leap beyond proof. For Aquinas, it was reason illuminated by grace. For Hume, it was dangerous, a claim without evidence. But maybe. Every kind of knowing requires a little faith. In our senses, in our minds, in each other. We live in a world of competing certainties. Social media rewards outrage. Algorithms reward simplicity. But knowledge, true knowledge, is rarely simple. In school, we are told to believe in facts. In life, we are forced to navigate doubt. So perhaps the challenge is not to know more, but to listen deeper, to ask whose knowledge is missing, whose voices have we ignored. Maybe knowledge is not a thing we own, but a conversation we join. Maybe it lives in the space between your question and someone else's silence. And maybe, just maybe, the wisest ones aren't those with answers, but those who keep asking. What kind of knowledge moves you most? Reason, feeling, faith, or all of the above? Comment below. If this journey stirred your curiosity, subscribe, share, and join us at Philowhisp, where every question is a new beginning.